All right, guys. Good afternoon. I'm here. We're going to talk about the legacy of the New Deal and talk about how the New Deal ends, and really just close up on FDR's domestic policies and the impacts of the New Deal on America. Okay. When we talk about the end of the New Deal, understand that the New Deal reached its highest point when FDR was elected for the for the second time in 1936. All right. He's going to experience more setbacks, though, than in the second term than he will in the first term. You see there the election. We thought that the election in 1932 was a pretty big landslide. This is going to be even a bigger landslide. And just as I said in class today, Alf Landon, the Republican candidate, was a strong supporter of a lot of the FDR programs. And so, therefore, he didn't have too much legging to stand on when it comes to criticizing Roosevelt. Okay, and so you even see now, instead of, I believe, Hoover had 4 states, now Roosevelt is going to have all but 2 states, and he has 61% of the popular vote. This is by far the largest landslide victory up to this period, and I believe, and pretty positive, ever. Okay. Now, what we will see from this election is what we call the Democratic Coalition. It's going to last for about 30 years, and it's only changed just a little bit. Now the Democratic Party is going to be the South, just as it has been. All right, it's going to be made up of people in the West. All right, it's going to be made up of the urban workers, just like it has been. But now we're going to add labor groups. We're going to add other ethnic groups, blacks and poor people. So we're talking about a coalition that is pretty broad, and it will change, in the mid 60s because of civil rights a little bit, but we'll see that this is still pretty much most of these people, except for the South and the West, are still part of the Democratic Coalition. Now, FDR's criticism, it's going to come in the form of the Supreme Court. Understand that the Supreme Court is made up of a bunch of old white men who have been around for quite a long time. All right, and they've ruled a couple of FDR's initial programs unconstitutional, primarily because they didn't allow for the competition or free competition of other businesses. Like the AAA required all farmers, and they said, it should be the farmer's choice to decide whether or not they are a part of it, and etc. Okay, so the Supreme Court is going to rule them unconstitutional. FDR is furious. So what he tries to do is he's going to try to replace the justices, and so he comes up with this court packing plan where any justice over the age of 70, they can allow one new judge. All right, and it would bring them up to 6 new justices if everybody stayed. All right. And those are 2 Supreme Court cases. All right. So all 9 justices, like I said, were old white men. Only 3 were sympathetic to the New Deal, 2 were unpredictable, and 4 really wanted to block the New Deal. All right. So he had a little bit of room for concern here. Okay. In fact, the major justice that brought issue was this Willis Van Devanter, who wanted to retire but felt that FDR with his polio really was unfit and unsafe. Here are just a couple political cartoons that show FDR's attempt at controlling the Supreme Court. I think this is my favorite one, where they associate him with being a dictator. Now, his plan was not necessarily illegal, but Congress at this point is kind of fed up with FDR's broad executive power that he asked for in 32. And they kind of felt that, all right, we've started making some moves in the right direction. Let's pull back some of his power and try to control him a little bit. Okay. Eventually, the crisis is going to be ended when the court declares the Wagner Act and the Social Security Act constitutional. All right. Eventually, through 32 through 44, when he dies, he will appoint 5 justices to the Supreme Court. Okay, now in 1938, we're going to see the end of the New Deal. Other than the Fair Labor Standards Act, FDR's second term really didn't have much going for it. It was more of a maintenance term of keeping things going, trying to maintain the recession that we were in. All right. What occurs in 37 is what they call the Roosevelt recession, and they believe that because he tried to reduce government spending and balance the budget, gosh, how dare he? What happens is America is going to go in a slight recession. You're actually going to see a rise in unemployment. Again, you can see it goes up from 37 to 38. All right, and luckily it'll start going down, obviously, by the beginning of World War II. But this slight recession is going to hurt them just a little bit. Okay, now let's talk about the overall impact of the Great Deal. Okay, organized labor had a huge change during this time period. Understand that during the 20s, the unions were pretty weak. One reason why is because most of the business were making a lot of money, so they paid their workers appropriately. Okay, by 1938, the CIO, or Congress of Industrial Organizations, is going to form under a gentleman named John Lewis. All right, they're going to use this Wagner Act, which we'll look at tomorrow in class, to bring collective bargaining to more workers. Basically, Wagner Act allows more unions to be created. And you see here that they're going to be successful at creating unions with Ford, Chrysler, GM, U.S. Steel, textiles, rubber, etc., etc. All right. By 1940, which is a very short period of time of existence, the CIO is going to have more union members than the AFL. All right, which we've talked about with Samuel Gompers. And there's pictures of John Lewis. Here's John Lewis with Samuel Gompers. In 1955, during the Cold War, you're going to see a union or merging of the AFL and CIO, and they're still today the most powerful union in the country, AFL-CIO. And in fact, they have a lot of political clout with politicians. Now, for the first time during this time period, you're going to find the uniting of unskilled and skilled laborers that became unionized. All right, women and African Americans are going to benefit because most of the unskilled laborers were women and African Americans. All right. The other thing that really kind of helps them, again, is this Wagner Act is going to make the union stronger because it says that basically businesses are required to allow unions the opportunity to form. All right, and so it kind of takes the hands out of the federal government a little bit. All right. In terms of women, the New Deal is going to bring few economic benefits to them. There's still going to be a lot of unequal wages. Women do have obviously the right to vote since 1920, but their political power is pretty limited still. They will get a cabinet member, ambassador, some judges, a senator, but politically the numbers are still way, way down. The impact on African Americans, this is probably the one area that has had the least benefits of the New Deal. Racism and segregation are going to remain strong. In fact, when the Black Brain Trust meets with Roosevelt, Roosevelt's going to promise to try to do some things to help them, but very little is done, and he'll eventually lose the support of a number of black prominent civil rights leaders. Okay. But the NRA is going to lower wage scales for black workers. The AAA is going to allow for the eviction of sharecroppers and tenants. So that's really going to hurt the southern blacks who are still stuck on the farms. All right, here are just some added details. Now, despite the inequalities in New Deals, blacks supported FDR. One, because he, like I said, he did hire some African Americans to position. Eleanor Roosevelt was a huge uniting force, and spoke out against racial discrimination as well as gender discrimination. The RFC brought assistance to a lot of unemployed blacks through the WPA. Those that were eventually kicked off of their farms or tenant farms will eventually find some work. Some of them will find some work through the WPAs. Here's a picture of Roosevelt, Eleanor, with singer Marian Anderson. Marian Anderson, who was a great opera singer at the time, she was denied the right to sing in one of the famous music halls, whether it was Carnegie Hall or somewhere of that nature, because of her skin color. And so after hearing about it, Eleanor Roosevelt granted Marian Anderson the opportunity to sing at Lincoln Monument. And so there were thousands of people at the Lincoln Monument while she sang, and very moving musician that she is, singer, excuse me. For Hispanic Americans, Mexican Americans, they're going to have a lot of difficulty because most of them are migrant farmers, and so the Dust Bowl is going to crush them. And as the Okies and Arkies from Oklahoma and Arkansas move out west into the Southwest, they're going to kick out a lot of the Mexican Americans and take their place on the farms. Congress is going to create some immigration restrictions, obviously, and we're going to deport some illegal residents, and that way to reduce the state welfare payments. All right. In terms of Native Americans, again, they remain the poorest, still as they are today. We do have the Indian Reorganization Act, which is going to shift from the U.S. Indian policy from Indians as Yemen farmers to unified autonomous tribes. All right, many gained employment in the Indian Bureau of Affairs. All right, but again, the reservations are destitute. A lot of them are going to become alcoholics, be addicted to drugs. There's not a lot of advancement for Native Americans. In terms of the South and the West, the AAA is going to help the South depend on sharecropping. All right, subsidizing farming is going to be a huge step forward for a lot of landowners in the South. All right, the West is going to receive more work, relief, and welfare than any other region. Hydroelectric power, irrigation programs. One of the things they do for the Dust Bowl is they literally plant trees, and I forgot the type of tree it is, but they plant these trees in a straight line, almost to create like a wall to block the dust. And it's some type of tree that is able to grow and survive in arid desert climates, like a cactus, so to speak. Now, in conclusion, the New Deal really only lasts 2 years. We have two bursts, 1933 and 1935, which consists of the first and second 100 days. The New Deal was not very successful economically, as we talked about in class, but it's that psychological help, all right, relieve the suffering by giving people hope and giving them something to occupy their time. But understand, wealth is still unequally distributed. There's still really rich and a lot of poor people. All right. The New Deal was very successful socially. All right. Social Security Act, Wagner Act, Fair Labor Standards Act all helped the elderly, disabled, citizens, labor unions, workers. Women, minorities, domestic workers, small farmers, again, received the least amount of help. Okay, but tomorrow we're going to look at all these acts, and we're going to kind of get an idea of which of the acts are still around today. How is this New Deal revolutionary, or how is it evolutionary? All right, is this continuation of the progressive movement, or is this a total different outcome? All right, that is it. Have a good day.